I know you got problems, know you at the bottom, know you took a loss today. Everybody want bottles, living for a throttle, you just want bottle day.
Welcome to the Primal Movement Podcast. I am your host, Bam, and today I'm joined by my good friend, Coach Colin, also known as Recoded by Colin. Coach Colin, or just Colin, has been a good friend of mine for 5+ years now, and we've been on this Recode movement coaching journey together, side by side, through ups, through downs, but we've always remained close friends and comrades, and also shared really cool ideas with each other. And one of the big things that you really helped unlock with me, number one, was the deepest version of my corners. And then the second one was the deepest version of my backdrop or my drop-in type of speak. We're talking about locomotion and gait. The first time really that I met you, this is down in New Orleans, I remember that I was doing access hinges on slam boards. And I had been practicing my hip hinge from CrossFit, Olympic weightlifting. Then I started to look at natural movement and then strongman. And I had really been dialing in my hip hinge. And I remember going and doing a bunch of these access hinges with maybe a 20-pound kettlebell. Light stuff. We're just doing reps at reps. And you're like, yeah, your knees are just hitting neutral. My kneecaps were just hitting neutral at that time. And you're like, yeah, you want the whole thing. And my first thought was like, no way is this guy talking to me about a hip hinge, because I couldn't imagine in my brain anyone that had spent more time thinking about not only the hip hinge in itself, muscular activation, but also about the rotary action of the femur and what the feet are doing. And yet you had already been there. So you were able to kind of see that, and the same thing happened with the backdrop. But overall, one of the biggest things that I appreciate about you as a movement coach is that you've always been what feels like a couple steps deeper into what is possible with the body. And you're like, yeah, you're doing it, but let's do it a little bit more. And I'm like, no way. And that's always been really fun. And you've just really helped me unlock my body and my coaching skills. So thank you for being here. And yeah, I want to hear your thoughts. And
first off, blessed to be here, of course. Thank you for inviting me out to this beautiful spot. Got a pool in the back, good vibes over at Uberzati too, hanging out, chilling, great people. It's always awesome to bring good minds together in a great place. You're always going to find something great that comes from that, out of that collaboration. And back when we first met, just starting there, I remember you had the sides of your head shaved, and the long hair. You just looked like a Viking, and just learning you up in the drop in, and obviously the hinges and all. And I appreciate the kind words about telling me that I'm a few steps ahead, and I feel like I was one of the few people, as we know, that just obsessed over this, and wanted to apply it to myself, because I think that the only true way to understand something as much as you can is to apply it to yourself. You really have to live what you teach, and I think just the whole first part of our relationship was, I was looking at you as this just phenom of a creature, just mind and body, a phenom of a creature. I'm like, man, this guy's energy is unreal. And I just wanted to feed off of that, because I think that I was very mellow and just soft-spoken, didn't really share my ideas as much as I could have. And that's one big thing that I learned from you instantly was, hey, this man likes to share what he has to say, and I want to learn how to do that more, because I really sat with my thoughts and sat with the recode, sat with the gate, and I would just do it. And then you were so open-minded to listen to what I had to say, and through that collaboration becomes greatness. And that's why we are sitting here today, because we want to collaborate with each other and other people and elevate our knowledge of the human body not only between ourselves, but see what other people have to say, bring that in, and then say, does this work? Or is what I'm doing working? And can I learn something from them and then apply it to what I do and then take it even further? And I think that that's where both of us have that same mindset. We're like lions, no pun intended, Lionheart. We're like lions in a pack on the same mission, going the same way. And it doesn't matter, like, we have our own companies. It doesn't matter that it's you have your company in movement, I have my company in movement. We need to collaborate for the greater good of humanity to take this to the next level. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, be on the podcast, the opportunity to meet Ewar and get some footage in while I'm here, and really just everything throughout our relationship. I'm not grateful for any other. There's no other human being that I'm more grateful for than our relationship.
Yo, respect. I love that. I really appreciate you saying that. And I want to give people a little bit of a foundation and background right now. So both Colin and I met each other at GLS under the GOTA system. Specifically, Coach Gill was the one who brought us together and instilled in us a deep understanding of the Recode mindset. And the Recode mindset is when you observe your movement, especially in a slow motion assessment, and you say, here are the ways that I'm not moving in a way that I would like to, that aren't natural. And so you choose different corrective exercises, different pieces of awareness to try and get your body to move in a more efficient, more powerful, more durable way. And Colin and I have been on that journey for 5 years now, and there's a very few amount of people who've been actually doing this work to the degree that we have for as long as we have.
Well, I think even we've been on it together for 5 years, but even before we met, we were still digging deep. So I would even say, even in the 7-year mark, because we were kind of picking at it online and trying to learn for ourselves, and then really immersed about 5 years ago.
I think for me, the difference is, like, I could say my deep movement recode started when I was 15 doing jiu-jitsu. That was when I started to actually look at technique, look at how I was moving, and rep it out and understand that, subconscious behavior can be altered through awareness, intentional movement, technique, and drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling, and then practicing, and then going and competing, and then we're just repeating that process over and over again. It's the martial art mindset, but then something very radical and different happened. Was we took the martial art mindset to martial arts, and we put it to running and gait and walking and standing and squatting and hinging, like the most basic of movements. We took this martial art mindset, which says, just like the samurai swordsman is like, I want my one slice with that blade, with that katana blade, to be so perfect. I'm going to practice that over and over again. This one simple movement. We have that mindset with how we walk, how we run, how we just simply bend our legs, squat to the ground, and reach to the ground. So that's kind of the background on how Colin and I met, where we're coming from. So we've taken those 5+ years of intentional moving, intentionally trying to up level and increase our performance on a movement standpoint. And now we're taking what we learned for ourselves and bringing it to the world through our own different businesses. One thing that's really cool about this whole process is that both Colin and I started this process not because we wanted to necessarily teach movement, because we wanted to do it for ourselves. Before you started to really change your body and look at your movement, what was it like to be, before the times, young Colin?
Yeah, so I think similar to you, when you're talking about, like, in jiu-jitsu, kind of creating that awareness in yourself of where your body's at in space and time, and understanding that you can change the way that your body moves. I mean, I remember distinctly there was a day on the baseball field. We're all just trying to get faster. Anybody that cares about being better, you're trying to get faster in your sport. And
You were a baseball player.
Yeah, baseball player since I was 3 years old, 4 years old. Didn't really play anything else, maybe recreationally, basketball or soccer. But besides the point, I remember there was a point in time where I was like, for some reason, I feel like the sprint has to be like pigeon-toed, and like all the energy has to like keep going like back towards my midline. I felt like it had to be that sort of like I had to funnel my energy to a point in front of me. Like I knew that was the case. Like that, I was like, there's no way that you would have your energy go away from you when you're running. Like why would I want my energy to go that way or that way? I need it to go right in front of me. And I need to send that energy there somehow. So, just like any kid with an idea, you just start practicing that. And it didn't really take me anywhere because at that point I was addicted to video games and didn't really care much about baseball. And then I started to get serious. And by then, for me, it was too late to get serious because the sciatica had already started to settle in. Lower back pain.
What age were you when you started to get sciatica, low back pain?
When I first became aware of it, I was right around 16, 17 years old.
Sheesh.
And it was like I'm sitting in the chair, and I remember having a thought around 17 years old, like junior, senior year of high school. I remember having a thought that was like, I can't do this forever because I'm sitting in that chair and I have pain, and I'm thinking about like who I want to be as a man and who I want to be when I grow up. And I'm like, I can't do this forever. So like, why am I doing it now? And one thing, if you don't know about like video game addiction, when you look at the brain scans and how it lights up, very, very similar to any drug that you would deem as addictive. Like, you got your like cocaine or meth addicts. If you watch the way the dopamine lights up in the brain, it's very, very similar. So it's not an easy thing to get away from. So it took me a few years to kind of step away in order to start bettering myself completely. And as I started taking that step away from sitting in the chair, because I think that coupled with some other things was a big reason why I was having a lot of my issues, because I wanted to sit down and play video games for 6 or 7 hours a day and then go do one of the most explosive things on the planet, which is pitching. Yeah. And those things don't mix, right? So having those two things in your life where, I mean, my daily routine when I was 17 to 19 years old was get up, play video games before school, go to school, sit in a desk all day, come home, play video games, go to practice, eat dinner, play video games, rinse, repeat. And so if I wasn't playing baseball, I was probably sitting down, or I was in the CrossFit gym. And that's where I think started to accelerate some things as well, because I was doing a lot of like thrusty movements where I'm starting to shorten my hamstrings, shorten my lower back, shorten the whole back chain in general. So when I go to land, when I'm pitching, and I start to get into like these types of long positions, my body starts like compensating, and I started like vaulting really hard, and my hamstring is just locking up on me. And even to this day, if I don't tend to my left side, much like your left side, right? If I don't tend to it, after a week or so, it'll start to kind of go back to its old tendencies. Mm-hmm. It starts to get a little tight. But for the most part, I mean, movement is medicine, and there's not a claim that's like, oh, I don't have to do anything anymore and I'm just perfect. It's we're constantly trying to get better, and through that, we're taking ourselves to a level where pain is almost non-existent. And if it ever walks into our life, we know how to take care of it. And I think that's what we want to empower more people with, is the ability to combat the pain when it walks into their life at any point in time. Because if you look at even like current modern medicine is very band-aidy over bullet hole wounds, where it's like, hey, if you have pain, come see me, I'll take care of it, boom, and then go about your day. I'm not going to give you the knowledge to get rid of your pain necessarily, but on our end, I think we want to see people become more empowered. And we talked about this the other day with Carly. It's just, hey, is our job actually movement training, or is it more bringing awareness to the people to give them power over their own lives? And I think that's more where we lie as a coach. And movement training just happens to be what we fall into.
Yeah. I remember I think it was the first like real video that you and I created.
Oh gosh.
Was actually the waiting and resting postures.
Yeah.
Which I used for a long time and people loved it. I was the model.
When that blue wall first went up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was this video where I'm sitting on the ground and Colin is basically cueing me through a bunch of the ground resting postures that you're going to be watching us kind of move through just naturally. And we're just inviting people into these postures, giving them a name, showing the shapes so that people know that that's an option for them. Because like you, I think there's probably a lot of kids right now who spend all day sitting, and maybe the only like playtime they have is like recess or a sport. And if they're not doing recess or a sport, they're sitting at the dining room table, they're sitting on the couch, or they're sitting in a classroom desk. And that just really, really tightens up the body and just causes a lot of problems. And so we're not like necessarily going to people's bodies and trying to erase all of the excess tension. We're just saying, even something like, did you know that you could change from a chair at home to being on the floor, or to being on a small stool or a little yoga block, or like you talked about that, like the tubular round pillow if you do play video games. And that is one of the conversations that is not really happening right now at all in the PT, chiro, strength and conditioning world. It's a new thing that's going to hopefully trend, is getting back to the ground so that we're not spending our lives in like this abstract 90-degree angle that the couch and the chair puts our body in, which is so bad for the human body. So I do think that it is a lot of awareness, and I see the work that we're doing. I don't see it happening in a lot of other places. Inviting people to the ground, inviting people to think about how they move, inviting people to think about their feet, inviting people to start to pay attention to how they walk. When you ask someone, like, do you know how you walk, or like, how do you walk? People are like, what are you talking about? Like, it's an extremely complex movement, and we are super far removed from having any real awareness on how the human body should actually move through time and space. And I'm not talking biomechanics or people at the institutional level. I'm talking about if you went right now to a high school athlete and asked them about super basic movements and asked them to demonstrate extremely basic movement patterns, you would have the widest array of like how people move. There is no uniformity. We're not being educated on how to move. We're being told to sit still and not move. But when we move, we're not being shown how to move. And because of that disparity of spending so much time not moving, that when we go to move, it's like weird. You feel like Bambi. You're like, I don't even know how to use this thing. And you're growing at the same time. No wonder that so many of us are experiencing chronic pain and having injuries, especially at a younger and younger age.
So I got a few things with that. And the first thing I want to start with is I think that the wave of awareness is starting with food. I think so many people are starting to realize what's in our food, especially at the fast food level. And even though, like, I mean, we got raw milk in the fridge, we're eating good meat, vegetables, doing the thing, right? Eating good. And a lot of people are starting to realize, obviously seed oils, probably not good for you. Fast food, probably not good for you. But then that awareness will eventually start to extend into other things. And I think just patience is what we need to have. And I've kind of been using that word a lot this week, I feel. And just being patient with other people and being like, hey, we're here, we're ready. But, the teacher arrives when the student is ready. It's just that's how it's always going to be. But along the lines of the physical education, this is pretty cool stuff. So what we did when we started to develop the AI assessment was we went to a few colleges and we just took pictures of every single athlete doing their squat and doing their hinge. So we have hundreds of samples of these kids. And it's so interesting when you just take all the squats and you put them all next to each other. And then you go look at like third world countries or indigenous tribes, and you get the squats and you put all those squats next to each other. All of the indigenous squats look the exact same. And then you look at every single one of those college athletes, not one of them is the same. And that's an interesting just piece of it of data that we collected is all these kids, when they land to the ground, it looks different than the person next to them. Why is that happening? And when we start asking the right questions and we ask enough of the right questions, eventually it leads to the truth. And so, we start taking all of those pictures and comes back and we're like, okay, we need to figure out a way to educate more people. So we were actually in a meeting with some guy named John, and he brought up a term called physical literacy. And I really like how that lands because we already have physical education, which,
I would disagree that we do not have physical education.
How do you mean?
Traditional PE as like
right.
Like I didn't there's a lot of years that I did not have PE.
Really?
Yeah.
Like in public school?
Correct. It was like
PE?
You're going to go to your PE class, and then sometimes they would just like it would just be like an extra recess or something.
Right. Okay, so let me explain that for a second. So like you play dodgeball.
Yeah.
Right? Something like that.
PE, you play dodgeball.
Yeah. Right.
We're just it's just like extra recess in a gym.
Yeah, you have a swimming unit, you have a pacer test unit, you have like the standardized testing, whatever. But the good thing is it still promotes that kids do athletic things. That's a start. That's a start. That's not by any means where it should be. That's a start. Physical education can be what it wants to be. I don't care to change it. But let's bring something new into the world that lights up a different part of the brain. Physical literacy, where these kids are quite literally learning what movement is, what it means to be physical in the world, and how that works. So, we just had a little. We're having a test run with this company that's taking a high schooler, and they're learning this physical literacy program, and then they're gonna go once a week with 3 middle schoolers, and they're gonna teach them that physical literacy program. So for athletes, it might be how to set up for a 5-10-5, how to set up for a sprint, how to measure these things. But in the mix, we wanted to throw in resting postures on the ground. Hey, how do we set up ourselves before we even set up for the 5-10-5? Can we start to take care of our bodies a little bit before we get into the 5-10-5, before we get into testing how many push-ups we do? So we're doing some sort of like standardized testing, but also giving them an ability to understand that there's this natural way of moving, and just exposing them to it. Because once you expose somebody to something and they become curious, nothing stops curiosity. That's a quote from Curious George, by the way.
Shout out Curious George.
Shout out the monkey, man.
That's definitely very true when it comes to like nutrition. You just have to plant the seed that there is a good way to eat and there is a less than good way to eat. And as soon as that seed is planted in somebody, then you start looking at food and you say, is it on this side or is it on the other side? And that polarization for some people is difficult to swallow. It took a while for, even when I was growing up, I remember it was like, what, cereal's bad for you? Like, come on, it's just Special K.
It literally has paint thinner in it.
It's just Captain Crunch. Like, come on, it's cereal. How can it be bad for you? Turns out it is. It's really bad for you.
Yeah.
And the initial polarization of something as maybe healthy or optimal and unhealthy, non-optimal, is difficult for some people to swallow. It's hard for people to swallow right now, especially who are in the fitness and strength conditioning community, when someone who's looking at natural movement can come in and say like, hey, that movement's less than ideal. It has little movement nutritional value for your body.
Yeah.
It might be fun for you to do, but however, for the sake and the purpose of the health of your joints, the health of your tissues, then this has very small amount of nutritional value to it.
I like the way you put that. Just the
yes.
nutritional value of movement.
Yeah. And so I think that you're one of the leading minds in terms of natural movement, in terms of the body and how it is designed to move, and posture right now. And I think there's a lot of conflicting ideas that are in the world. And I think this is a really good opportunity to dive into some that have some preconceived ideas about them.
Hit me.
The one that comes to my brain the first, and this is what like you and I spent so much time drilling and making sure that our foot and ankle was strong and ready to handle all of the demands of sprinting, running, jumping, resistance training, whatever it is that we wanted to do with our bodies. And so obviously we come from, shout out Coach Gill, but we come from the Go to cloth, and we've taken a lot of those concepts and expanded on them, refined them, dropped some that weren't helpful, kept some that one that is extremely powerful to us is having a strong foot and ankle, or a foot that the arches aren't maintained. They're not excessively collapsing. They're not really even collapsing at all. So can you please just introduce us to the foot and ankle? And before you do that, I'm just going to blanket to the general population. Most people have no awareness about their foot. And the reason is because we were placed in socks and then shoes from a very, very, very early age. And when you put on the socks and you put on the shoes, the bottom of your feet, those 15 muscles, start to they become underworked. And so your arches, those three arches of your foot, you got your transverse, you got your medial, then you've got your lateral arch. Those things start to deteriorate. And then you get quote unquote flat feet. From flat feet, you get bunions, you get a bunch of postural misalignments. It goes up the chain, and podiatrists are very aware of this. This is the reason that we have inserts for our shoes. But a lot of people have feet that haven't been actually put to work. They haven't been walked on. And not only that, they've been in shoes their whole life. So you can see when somebody's foot is underdeveloped. It's a true thing. It's why we have podiatrists. It's why we have bunions. It's why we have shoe inserts. On the good side, on the optimal side, which is what you and I look at, we always look at like, what is the best case scenario? We don't look at solving worst case symptoms. We look at what is the best case scenario for my foot and ankle. What is your take? Give us the lowdown on a strong foot and ankle and your thoughts.
Okay. So I think the foot it's obviously extremely complex. It's 33 joints. And I mean, a lot of people's foot, it looks like a 2x4, and it kind of
snowshoe boot,
and it kind of just like sits right here, and a lot of pressure through the heel. What's thought of as like tripod foot. There's just pressure everywhere, which is it's a good start.
Tripod foot.
Yeah.
Heel, big toe, pinky.
Heel, big toe. So first and fifth metatarsal and heel, right? So you're kind of working the whole foot, which is a great start, right?
Can I talk on that for a second?
Yeah,
because tripod foot is talked on a lot. People are like, tripod foot. Tripod foot, I can understand what that means when I'm doing a standing, like a bicep curl or a back squat.
Right.
But if I go to walk and run, how do I try? It doesn't seem like it transfers to the gait.
Yeah, and
the human walk and run.
In really anything athletic that you're gonna do. So like, if my foot lands to the ground and the heel comes down, now what I'm doing is I'm shutting off a lot of the joints in the foot. So like I said earlier, there's 33 joints in the foot, and we need to be able to utilize all of them when we move. So a big piece of that is this kind of rotary aspect, or this like torqued aspect of the foot. And if you watch a lot of high-level athletes, what starts to happen is you see that when you watch slow motion video, especially the athletes that are healthy for a long period of time, you'll start to see them create power in this little torque that happens at the foot. And when we get rid of that, or if we train with the heel down, we just kind of lose the ability to move that heel. And it goes further and further into depth the more you want to be explosive, or if you just want to be a long distance runner, or like we talked about every day, we talked about the other day, some people just want to be an average athlete in everything. They just want to be able to do whatever they want whenever they want. And I think we're some of those people. Like, you want to surf, or if you decide you want to play tennis, you want to go play tennis, you know. But the foot is really one thing that I obviously have spent a lot of time thinking about, considering our past. And I think that the overall idea that I'm at now is, how strong can I be with my toes? How much decompression can I get in my foot? So how much space can I get in between my toes? And how much can I make my toes and my foot feel like my hand? Because we use our hands for everything all day. I mean, you were talking about this the box. What is that? Where we don't reach.
Oh, Carly was talking about that. Yeah.
It's like you have this like box around you and you don't reach, but like everything is just going on right here. Like,
this imaginary box that people live in, where you don't really like move too much outside of like sit down, come up, like
and
reach
we're just
for a phone.
here and we're just using our hands for everything. Well, what happens if we start taking our shoes and socks off more often? What do you start to notice? And that's where it starts. Right, that's the little piece of information that you give somebody that's starting, where, hey, just take your shoes and socks off for 20 minutes a day and just tell me what you notice, and then do it again tomorrow and tell me what you notice again, and then do it again, and then do it again, and then you're going to start to notice that you may not want your shoes and socks on as much as you used to have them on, and then you may notice that you want to get some toe spacers, you want to start opening up your foot a little bit, and then you're going to start to go down that path of, how does that start to affect the way that I move? And how strong can I get my foot? Now, I've come across a lot of really, really good athletes in these past 5-6 years. And shout out Tiana Tolleson. She's a soccer goalie. She played at Vanderbilt University, grew up in Hawaii, and grew up on the beach. And as you may know, when athletes grow up on the beach, their toes spread out very, very far. And her toes are like literally like hands. And when you watch that development from a young age, you start to realize, oh, this person has strong feet. That's why they're so good at what they do. And she spent a lot of time outside at the beach, running around, doing her thing, much like, was it Usain Bolt used to run on the beach with rocks in his hands?
I don't know.
Pretty sure.
That sounds awesome.
But like, I mean, it makes sense, right? But a lot of high level runners did that because it builds everything in the lower half of the leg, and your toes can literally go around the sand. And I'm sure you've watched it as you've been going surfing quite a bit. It's one of my favorite places to train the feet. And if you're somebody out there that's already training movement, you understand how important it is to have boards and how to train feet, and be able to anchor the big toe is a big one. So when you anchor that big toe and you have that little slant, what starts to happen is you start to get a little bit of that tension all the way from the big toe all the way around. All of the metatarsals are activated, or attached to the ground, if you will, and all the toes are activated, and it goes into that lateral calf, into that fascial link that runs up into the IT band. You just start to connect everything together into a strong landing. So I think that's a good base of foot knowledge for you.
Yeah. And so when we start talking to people about that, and like, let's say you start showing, can you show us the strong foot and ankle shape again?
Yeah. So.
Yes, when you go into that shape, and then when you show us the torque action at your heel, boom, that one.
Mm-hmm.
So the common argument is that isn't a real or an ideal position. That is not what they call that. That's just supinating your feet. And when you do that, that is setting you up for injury. It's not a real thing. And also, there are a bunch of high-level athletes, including LeBron James, etc., who, when their foot lands, they don't do this rotary torque action. They collapse to the inside. They pronate, their inside ankle bone starts to drop, and their arch flattens out. So there's two voices right now that I'd like to kind of suss out with you, because I think it comes from a place of unknowing. And the two voices are, number one, rotary torque action at the foot and ankle is not possible because the ankle is a hinge joint. So it's not able to do this rotary torque action. That rotary torque action that you're doing is actually just supination, and you don't want to just use your foot in just supination. Instead, you just want your foot to be a foot, and if it pronates, that's okay, and if it, however it looks, if it's flat, it's okay. You just want strong feet.
Yeah, so remember on that podcast, I don't know if I told it to you, but the one we were listening to, Joe Rogan and the archaeologist,
Yeah.
he said something where it was like, just because something is called something doesn't mean that something is that something.
Yeah.
Right? So let's just take, for example, like all of the terms that we have applied to human movement via biomechanics or the medical community, right? So we apply these terms to what we call movement, but who are we to label what that is? In my perspective, I see this, it feels strong, it feels good, I have no pain. When clients do this, they have no pain, they feel strong, they feel good. Now, the argument of somebody like LeBron James or any runner that's letting that drop, there's a lot of times even just a transfer of energy as they take their step, to where we talked about when an athlete goes into like this backdrop kind of phase here, and then they come through and the hip kind of rolls through, and we see that the ankle just follows it through, and we see that it kind of looks as if they're pressurizing like an inside ankle bone low shape when they're not. If we were going to really get into it, I would put some footage in front of us and kind of like talk about that. But my big thing here is understanding that we looked at the ankle and said, okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So we've got what would be called supination, pronation, right? And that's the argument that you're talking about, yeah?
Yep.
So like if I supinate my ankle, that's what it would look like.
And from the side, it looks like underneath your big toe, it's coming down. It's coming up.
It's coming up. Like I'm actually like supinating my ankle.
Like there's no pressure in that medial arch.
No,
it's
not
just
at all.
all just
and then that
dumping
would be,
to the lateral.
That would be my pronation, right?
That would be your pronation.
So almost like the pinky toe has the ability to come off the ground easily.
Yep.
And I don't think necessarily we're talking about supination and pronation. That's why I'm kind of making the pre-existing notion about terms.
Yep.
Because we're not actually really talking about supination or pronation. We're talking about the ability to rotate from the ground up.
Yeah.
And when I land to the ground, if I start to absorb some force this way, then I can utilize that force to rotate back the other way. I'm not actually supinating my foot or shoving pressure through the fifth metatarsal, because the fifth metatarsal is the most weight-bearing bone in the body on its own. You don't have to try it to put more pressure into it.
It's already got it.
It's already going to take it. So the thing is I just want to land with a good, strong forefoot and then learn the ability to funnel the energy into the strong part of the leg.
Right.
So in my perspective, taking the terms supination and pronation, it makes no sense to me to talk that way, because it's not just like a two-dimensional movement of side to side.
It's not. It's actually a three-dimensional
It's very three-dimensional, where everything is working together in order to hold that pressure.
Yep.
Instead of, okay, I'm either going to put it here or I'm going to put it there.
Right.
Why can't it be both? And then everything works together.
Yep.
It's not a this or that.
Yes.
And I think having a this or that mindset is very limiting to growth in any field.
Yeah. And I think it's the reason that it is, there's two reasons why this argument or this is come to light. Number one is because people are trying to mimic a shape, and so they do put a lot of pressure on the outside, and you do see loss of contact with that big toe. You do see some strange things with people's feet, especially underdeveloped people's feet who are trying to hold an athletic shape and create this rotary torque action that you can create, that I can create with my foot, who don't have that access, that mobility unlocked just yet. So I think that people have seen that and said, hey, that's probably not a good thing for us to do. Or maybe they've thought that's what they should do, and then they ended up rolling their ankles or kind of hurting their feet, and then they're like, oh, that's not good. You shouldn't do that type of thing.
Let me put it this way. Moving the human body is a skill, much like any other skill that we're learning. Like, example, swinging a baseball bat is a skill that takes years and years.
A simple swing of a baseball bat.
A simple swing takes years upon years upon years to master.
Or throwing a baseball.
And even the guys at the top 1%, 0.01% of swinging baseball bats are still trying to get better.
Yep.
So when it comes to movement, there is no perfect. It is only a skill that you are continually trying to get better at.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we kind of 5-6 years ago kind of got on that path of continually trying to get better. And these are some of the things that we've noticed is, hey, maybe when I land to the ground, shoving pressure out here in like a supinated shape isn't it. Maybe
not it.
And I mean, I've definitely tried shoving pressure through the inside of the foot. It just isn't it. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It may work for a short period of time. I want to rephrase that, because there are certain scenarios where athletically, let's say a hockey goalie has to shove pressure through the inside, come to the ground, and he has to block the shot to the goal with his pad. So there are certain scenarios where it works, but does it work for 10 to 20 years continually over and over again? And the results show that it doesn't, because look at the statistics on hockey goalies, knee surgeries, groin injuries, hamstring injuries, the inside hamstring. You look at...
But that's the 90-90 position they're doing.
Yeah.
Dude, there's no way that they're hurting themselves because they're just doing the 90-90 degree position.
Well, that's interesting. So...
I'm being sarcastic if anyone didn't pick that up.
Yeah,
The 90-90 position, how it's taught and how it's shown to me is that,
it's
non-ideal.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, it might help you with your hip, but is it really helping you long term? Like,
right.
It might help you feel good for a second.
Correct.
But is it going to help you long term, or are you just doing it because it feels good right now?
Yes, and this
Right.
it's the tiniest little bridge in your mind, but it's a huge distance for people to jump across, which is my hip is tight or I'm lacking internal rotation at my hip, so I do this one exercise that's trying to regain something or help my symptoms type of thing.
Right.
And that's a reactionary mindset. That's what we're trying to provide relief to symptoms type of mindset. Oh, my hip is doing this, so I should try and do this one thing. Where you and I are coming from is like, how does my hip actually move?
Mm-hmm.
And can I learn how to move that? And then to your point, which is brilliant, can I even try and do better? Can I be better at this? It's coming from what is the most ideal rather than a reactionary, oh, my left hip sucks, so I got to do this weird stretchy thing, and it's my hip hurts, so I'm going to try and do this thing to kind of cure my symptoms type of thing. It's a reactionary based mindset where ours is not only a preventative based mindset, but of like, how can I be the best at moving my body, all the different parts, and integrating those different parts into whatever movement task at hand is present.
Yeah, simply proactive versus reactive.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that we're setting up for when we're 90 years old. I'm not setting up for tomorrow. I'm making sure that when I'm 90 years old, I can still run up the stairs.
Yeah.
I'm making sure that when I'm 90 years old, I'm not going to fall to the ground because simply I have no control. I'm going to go to the ground intentionally to play with my grandkids. I'm going to run up the stairs because I'm still an athlete at 90 years old, and I'm so excited. And that's one thing that it's not that I like to flex it, but I like to be like, I'm excited to see what happens in 70 years.
Oh,
know?
I think that at like 50, I'm going to be a beast
Yeah,
at
that's
50.
what I'm saying,
I think
right?
50, 60, I'm going to be a better athlete than I am right now
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Tom Brady.
without drugs.
And Tom Brady is taking a very similar approach where
Yep.
he's looking for opportunities to be better every single day. And what did we see this last year? His 40 was faster than when he was 20, right? His 40-yard dash is faster now than when he was 20 years old.
And I don't really know what he's doing right now. I know I'm familiar-ish with the TB12 method that they're doing, but I don't think that he's doing a bunch of heavy resistance training and power development training in the strength conditioning room.
No,
to get his 40
a lot of
faster.
body weight, a lot of band work.
Yeah.
Just he's learning to control what he has, and I think if we all take suit with that of, hey, if I can learn to master this, and that doesn't mean that you can't add any resistance. I fully support weighted vests. I fully support throwing some weight on a landmine and getting stronger in that way. I fully support moving weight forwards. I fully support throwing 300, 400, 500 pounds on a sled and pushing it forwards. Even the ability to like the Z treads, like those things will get you strong. And if you don't think so, you should come try them for yourself. But those things will get you strong. And then imagine you get really good at running on those Z treads, and then you throw a 15-pound weighted vest on. You're gonna get cooked.
Sheesh.
You're gonna get cooked.
Sheesh.
And so I think just learning from the people that are doing great, like Tom Brady, learning from people that are actively trying to master their body is a good first step. Like if I think there was a good quote of like, don't take advice from somebody that you wouldn't want to live their life, or that portion of their life, right? So like if it comes to like a barista that's the best in the world, I'm going to take advice on how they make coffee. I may not take advice from them on how they move, but if they make a damn good cup of coffee, I'm going to take some advice from that person. And different people have different strengths. And I like how the conversation I had with Tim about like finding people that have great strengths in different areas, putting them together and watching something great happen. There's something beautiful about that. And if you respect somebody's grind in their niche and just like learn from them instead of thinking that you know everything, like, or even example in our niche, it's still, I don't own any of this that we're doing. I don't own these movements. I don't own the training. I'm trying to learn what's better than what I'm already doing so that, again, we can advance even further and feel even better and preserve our joints for even longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's something that I say a lot to my inner circle at Primal Movement, is that because we've come to some really strong conclusions about natural movement and about how the human body should move optimally in its most general sense, that doesn't mean that the methods we use to help people go from broken, dysfunctional, in pain, unaware about their body to a place of awareness and being able to move like you and I do, those methods to get someone from where they are to what I call the top of the mountain, those are constantly going to be refined, constantly going to be up-leveled, constantly going to be upgraded to where in the future youth are going to be able to go through, let's say, a program or an educational process that's going to give them all of the tools that we have and more in a faster amount of time. And
Physical literacy,
kinesthetic intelligence. Yeah. These things are not taught, and people aren't even aware that it is an intelligence to have, to be, oh, that's just an athlete, or, oh, you look really light on your feet, or you look like you move good. These are sayings that we have in our language that speak to an underlying understanding that there is a good way to move, that there are athletes, somebody who is light on their feet. there's something there that we can look at and we can understand more to say, like, can we teach other people to be light on their feet? Can we teach other people to be high-level athletes? Before we move on, I want to solidify my thoughts on the foot and ankle.
By all means.
And I agree with you. Only using the terms that have been given to us, which is a created language model of rotation, supination, pronation, all of those types of words. It doesn't really describe the action of the foot that you can do, that I can do, that creates this wave-like structure. And I really enjoy Julian Pinot, who is Strong Fit, and his language model that I learned, which is not calling it rotation, but calling it torque. Yeah. And so if I use my hand as an example, we know that my hand can pronate and supinate. Pronate and supinate. Okay, my wrist can do that. Pronate
in an open chain.
And rotation only talks about open chain, really. Mm-hmm. When they're really talking about a rotation, because it's a dead person on the table, or it's a PT that's grabbing your foot and they're passively rotating in an open chain your hip or what. They're not always looking at it in a closed chain environment. So if my hand can pronate and supinate, that's open chain. If I put my hand on the ground, and let's say I create a lot of pressure to the outside, the lateral line of my forearm, my tricep, and my lat, and I do that same motion to lower myself to a push-up, like, there are no words that describe this torquing action. The word is torque, which is like a rope that's like getting tighter in itself.
In baseball, we call it coiling.
Coiling, yeah. Coiling, torquing, spiraling. Those are words that describe the general action of increasing the elastic force inside of our body, pressurizing our body, connecting lines of muscle and tissue. That's when I hear people like, "Oh, that's just supination." I'm like, "Oh man, I want
more to it.
Yeah, there's so much more to it, because when you can coil and torque some different things in your body, dude, you create insane elastic force, insane tensegrity or connections that just build a really strong foundation of the foot and the ankle. And so there's a lot of different pieces that come to that. For instance, one of the ones that I think that you are let's say, the first person that really looked at the backdrop.
Right.
I want to talk about the backdrop because, dude, that thing is the coolest thing ever.
And you guys have been learning a lot this week.
Oh, my goodness. I love it when you come out and you teach us stuff. Because not only is the drop-in or in the gait cycle when the foot lands, that shape, nobody's talking about that shape. So nobody's talking about the regular drop-in shape, which is the shape that the
foot... We talking about anticipation here?
And then we're going to talk about anticipation. Nobody's really talking about this shape where the foot, knee, and ankle create this bow-like structure. Not a lot of people are talking about it. If you're hearing people talking about it, they're in the fringe. They're not in general awareness right now. So you've got this shape. You've got this crazy torquing action for the landing shape that you see in children, high-level athletes. You see it everywhere. Like, that is not a shape that you see in a fitness gym at all. And then you have this shape,
right,
which is something that you've really spent some long time looking into.
Probably about 2-3 years now.
Yeah. So I actually want to talk about the bow shape and then get into the backdrop. Because I think a lot of people don't have awareness on that bow shape and what it is. Shout out Gary Scheffler for coining the bow shape. Can you show us the bow shape? Because you also did help me get into my bow.
Yeah. Okay, so as we're absorbing pressure from the ground, because we can't just like pull energy from thin air. We need to pull energy from. I mean, if you know anything about physics, gravity comes. It's pulling you down. You absorb that energy from gravity pulling you down, and then you need to absorb that pressure into your body. It's either gonna absorb in this way, or we just talked about with the foot. There's so many different ways you can land with the foot, and honestly, there might even be infinite ways. Considering you could land in all these different areas here.
The general shapes. Let's keep to the general shapes. What do we got?
So general shape of the bow, right?
We got the bow.
So straight foot, and we start to rotate into it. right? So that it's that shape we're talking about with the foot that's helping us create this rotation, this externally rotated state. And I've had a lot of conversations with higher level medical professionals and talking about the bow shape in general. And to the eye, it looks like a bow. And they've pointed out to me that maybe it's not always a bow, but maybe some people's is more straight up and down, because we're looking at a lot of different individuals across the world and how different people move, but how can we kind of generalize what happens here?
Yeah.
And that external rotation is what we're talking about as somebody lands, because I'm generally a little bow-legged in structure, and people's structures slightly vary, but what happens is the main factor here is that we still see a slight external rotation at the femur level, shin bones, and all of the joints in the foot. So we start to see that
It's
torque
rolling
build up.
out.
It's rolling out. Everything's
out.
rolling out. And whether or not somebody creates like a bigger bow shape is almost, I don't want to say irrelevant, but it's more the fact that we're creating this external rotation as we land, so we can start absorbing and rotating, torquing, coiling, whatever term you want to use. We can start to feel more pressure lead to the outside strong parts of the leg.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
Okay, so now as we get into the backdrop, and do you have any comments about that before I move on?
I think it's just yeah. My one comment is that when the leg lands on the ground, it rolls open in a healthy state.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people say it will remain straight, or the knee will track right over the toes.
Yeah.
But the end all be all is the convergence of the body. Like how would you compress shout out Coach Gill. How would you compress your body to come all the way down to the ground?
Right.
And when you're talking about a convergence, it's going to be a spiral. Mm-hmm. It's going to spiral down and spiral up. It's not a mechanical up and down. Zzz, zzz, zzz. Mm-hmm. Nobody can do that. And by mechanical up and down, I mean like those little toy models. Zzz, like this. Like you actually can't really do that.
Or you even look at some of those
it's so difficult to do to come all the way down here. Instead, the way that we converge easily is by spiraling down.
Yeah, 100%.
And so the spiral down, which is the loading, which is the bowing action of the leg, it opens up so I can come easily down to the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's levels to it almost. And it's not even that there's like this shape has to be present right here. Well, maybe if I'm up a little taller and I'm not absorbing as much energy, it's not as prominent, right? It's like a gradient. And like you were saying, as we absorb more and more and more and more and more, we get down to the ground and we see a little bit more spiral happen.
Right.
And that's where we start to get into what happens when we start getting into the most force possible. And that's, as a baseball player, it's my job to understand that, because these hitters and these pitchers are absorbing the most force they can and letting it loose, and then absorbing the most force they can on the other leg as well. So we start getting into the backdrop, where we have the front drop, where we talk about this, and we're loading into this, getting a little spiral action into this. Now what happens after that? And it's a whole gradient of movement that connects, because it's not just I'm here and then I flip it to the other side and I'm there, right? It's not robotic like that. We know that. We know that movement is very, very, very fluid. So we have to understand that as we rotate, we continue to rotate. And like I said earlier, I've been using the word patience so much this week, where we start coming here and we get patient with exploding off of this leg, because I'm building more and more and more torque until the point of no return. And when I get to the point of no return, that's when everything just flips and it becomes easy. And we talked about this in the session today with some of the kids, where I'm asking them, hey, what does it feel like when you hit a home run? And they're all looking around and they're kind of like wondering, and Addie, she goes, nothing. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. It should feel when you're working out for like speed and power, the only thing you should really like feel per se is the point of fatigue, where you start to fatigue and you're like, okay, I'm good. But when you're running on the treadmill, it should feel effortless. It should feel like you can exert more and more and more force at an effortless level, and you just keep getting better and better day by day. So when we get to the backdrop and we get to the point of no return, we start to see these positions that look very similar to the swing, where I've got a baseball bat and I start to load up here. That's the swing. We're right there. I've got a glove in my hand. I've got a baseball. I start to come down the mound, and we see a lot of Japanese pitchers that are very, very high level at this, and they start to have this internal rotation of the leg, and they hold it as long as possible. And the first person that I learned this from was Ron Woolforth at the Texas Baseball Ranch, where he said it's not the front leg that dictates when the front leg lands. It's the back leg that when you hold that pressure for long enough and you start to drive that energy towards the plate when you're pitching, the back leg innately starts to put the front leg on the ground. And that's what we start to see in the gait. We start to see that the back leg is holding all that tension, and then at the point of no return, it feels like you have to like almost like hop or jump out of that step because you're in this position for so long, and you get to that point of what we look at the side view and call knee drive. It like comes up here, but when we look at the front and back view, we see that it's like this.
Yep.
And we see that everything just flips back over to the front drop. So you're just cycling between front and back drops over and over and over again, and you're seeing how deep you can get into that backdrop if you're a sprinter. You're seeing how deep you can get into that until, again, that point of no return where it feels like you have to just get out there just a little bit more.
Yep.
And the deeper, longer you can hold that backdrop, and you get a little bit more out of that step, you get a little bit more flight time. When you get a little bit more flight time, that's less friction because you're touching the ground less. You're getting out further on each step, and you're just cycling better and better and better to be faster and faster.
This conversation makes me think of right now the current understandings and education around gait and biomechanics are extremely two-dimensional. Like we talked about, rotation, supination. There isn't a lot of talk about spiraling, coiling, or this torque energy that when you look at a sprinter, almost all of them, when you look at them off of the blocks, that first movement is not knee drive. That knee is coming way almost across the body, and there's that deep backdrop.
Yeah.
It is something else that is like, hold on, I've never seen that before, and it's actually really hard for me to replicate in any kind of traditional fitness exercise or regimen.
Right.
When I'm looking at movement, and one of the reasons why I think you and I are on this path is because you and I see patterns. And when we start to see patterns that are universal and that show up all over the body, it's like, makes sense. Makes sense. Instead of like, there's my adduction times this many. Wait, hold on. Let me go back to my textbook. How many degrees of internal rotation am I supposed to have to make sure I'm okay? And it's like, actually, if we look at how the shoulder moves, it's in a spiral. And not only is it in a spiral, it's in an infinity pattern.
Right.
Okay. And then we got an infinity pattern. My spine also does that. When I crawl, when I walk, there's this little infinity pattern. What I love about the terms that are being created, like drop in and backdrop, deep resets, all of this, they're terms that describe a certain phase, and if you play the whole entire thing out, what you get is just another infinity sign, where instead of the normal what is taught right now, which is knee drive, ground force production, triple extension, it's just it's a two-dimensional cycle, like I'm on like a wheel, like just a straight two-dimensional wheel, as opposed to if you look at it from the front or the back, it becomes this opening, that becomes this closing, this becomes this deep reset that traces the other side of the infinity sign, and I'm just making infinity signs. It's the infinity drill over and over again. So when I see that pattern, that the running gait, just like many other things in life, are on this infinity sign, it's like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Right.
Like, absolute sense. The thing that's tricky is it's really hard to train if you lost it.
Yeah.
If you don't know what you're looking at, if you don't go deep into it, but it's really beautiful.
But when you start to feel it,
Sheesh.
it's a different thing when you start to feel it, because we can talk about it all we want, but it does it no justice. It's when somebody really starts to feel it, like Carson at the gym today. He was in my session, and he had been around you guys for a few weeks, and we were doing backdrop training, and he got on the sled, and he was like, oh, and he just did it.
Yeah.
Once he found it, he was like, oh, okay. And then he just did it, and he's like, my back feels incredible.
Yeah.
And he had just gotten off like a 17-hour flight or something like that, and went to the doctor, Carly was telling me, and they were like, yeah, like, and he's thinking about like doing some other stuff to like help his back. And then he comes in today, and he sits in the session, he pushes the sled around, and you know what, he wasn't even going to sit in the session. And then I was like, dude, it's going to be easy, chill, it'll be good for you. And he's like, all right, I'll stay. And then he just gets this huge light bulb.
Yeah.
And he just had it right there. Like the transfer of knowledge was there, and his back just decompressed, because the most explosive positions are also the most decompressive, which is really interesting. And when you're our age, we're a little bit more pliable than the elder that have been kind of messing with their joints in their body for a long time. So it's kind of harder to get them into those positions. But as long as you're working towards getting a little bit more, and a little bit more of that rotation to start happening, then you start to decompress that spine a little bit more. And that's the anticipation. Because the more we get into, and would you mind if I demonstrate that?
Yeah.
So that anticipation, where we were taught in the drop-in, where we were kind of like over here and like really digging into this side. And I just, one day I was like, that just doesn't feel right on like the side, the lat, QL, like all of that whole area. And I just started kind of dropping to the other side.
Just creating torque.
Yeah, creating more and more torque, which leads me into that type of a shape that I can explode out of and get to the other side. Well, when you start to get here, you start to really, really decompress the spine, because you're rotating it one way, but then you're leaning it the opposite way, which is an interesting feeling. And if you haven't felt that before, it can really be illuminating to a new way of moving. Even if you've been on the movement journey and you've been side bending into that same drop.
Coiling, side bending, all that stuff.
And if you just start to do it the other way, you start to notice that maybe that feels a little better. Mm-hmm. And that's a prime example of, we were on a path and thought that that was it, and then found something that feels better, makes more sense, and helps more people, and apply that. And then find something new, maybe next month, maybe a year from now, we find something that makes more sense, helps more people, and that we need to apply it.
Yeah. I mean, these are all the great thing about exercise, and even the drills that we do, or the names that we have, is, and even from the medical side, it's all completely made up.
Absolutely.
It's all fabricated, and it's just a way for human beings to observe the human body or movement in a way that they can like conceptualize, because there's just so much information. So we got to create terms, we got to create exercises, drills to help people feel certain things, so they can start to program different shapes. It's just like the martial arts and jiu-jitsu world, that how they taught jiu-jitsu when I first started training when I was 15, so it's, like over 10 years ago. Yep, over 10 years ago. That was way different than how they're teaching it now.
Yeah. Even go to one jiu-jitsu place and then go across the country and go to a different jiu-jitsu place.
Yes.
Different.
It's extremely different. So we're always going to be upgrading and up-leveling our knowledge, and I think that's what's really important, and why you and I have become close and remain friends, is because we're constantly on this searching journey. It's not like I'm going to plant my flag, this is how it is, and that's it.
Right.
Now that I have the answers, I don't even have to train anymore.
Right.
Like, you can observe all the film about UFC and jiu-jitsu and have all of the right answers and have zero ability to fight.
Yeah, I mean,
Like zero.
you're not wrong.
Zero ability. Once you have the right answers, then you can start really training. And that's
Yeah.
what they say happens when you get your black belt. Is they say, okay, now you're ready. Now you've explored the entire universe of what happens in this mat. Now when you start training, now you're actually learning. You actually start learning, they say, when you get your black belt. Not when you just like you found the right answer. Oh, this is how you do an arm bar. It's like, no. This thing is an evolution in and of itself for me and for all of us collectively. It's like a very, it's an alive type of thing. And we are right now part of that journey. It's like part of our teaching, part of our movement practice is this evolution of what is natural movement or what is healthy, optimal,
Right.
the best type of movement.
Like even exploring inside ankle bone low, right? Which is a really
You've been exploring it?
I've been exploring.
Sheesh.
Right, understand, because our body does it, right? And it's an open. If you are in the open chain, you can do pretty much whatever you want without hurting yourself, as long as you don't like try to force and snap your elbow, right? Something dumb like that. But if you're in the open chain, you can kind of throw your arms around, do whatever, and you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to the lower body, of course, we're starting to understand that as we absorb force in the foot, we see that coiling motion happen.
Yep.
That's just what happens when we absorb the force. It's not
You can observe that in young athletes, in high-level athletes, and in many people.
in indigenous cultures,
Yeah.
centenarian runners,
Yep.
right? Old individuals, no joint replacements. You can see the same things happening. But when we get into the open air, I was just messing around because I'm always looking for new ways to find how to splay my toes, because I was put into cleats at a young age.
Yeah, you had a very, very narrow toe box when I first met you.
Yeah, I was definitely just...
Your metatarsals were squished.
They were squished up.
They were squished.
I wasn't using all my joints, and maybe I'm still not using all my joints, but that's the goal, is to keep getting better. So as I started exploring more into like this feeling of like the lateral side of the ankle,
yeah.
which feels great, by the way.
Come on, dude. Talk about another thing that you helped me. Fish feet, baby. Let's go.
Right. So as I was just messing around on the couch one day, I was just kind of like open in the air, and I'm spreading my toes, and I'm realizing that to spread my toes the most, I have to go into this shape, which is what we would call inside ankle bone low. Because obviously I don't want to land there. That would hurt right up and through here. And so I was like, where is this useful? And then I was thinking almost like right before we land. And then how can we teach the body how to come back into that state? So I'm almost creating a wider surface area before I land to the ground. And then once I'm on the ground, that wide surface area gives me more foot control, gives me more ability to have torque, have the coil all the way up the chain. And so, it's just something that it hasn't really been talked about. And I think that finding a use for everything that your body does naturally, because even if like this was water here, right? I wouldn't go like this and feel it. I would do this.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
I would feel for it. And that's this is an interesting conversation.
Whoa,
right?
Yeah,
so I would feel the water like this, and that is an inside ankle bone low shape.
Big toe activation.
Big toe activation.
Yes.
But this is an interesting conversation, and I talked about this on another podcast for just like parents and themselves, because we're doing some help with a pediatrics office in Dallas, and we're just giving some education on how kids develop and what to watch out for, and maybe some equipment that you don't want to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those things is like those bouncers, right? The kid just sits there and they're constantly their attention is grabbed by these little toys that are around the bouncer. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So that bouncer, they're just barely off the ground. And when you're just barely off the ground, guess what you do?
Feel.
You reach and feel for the ground.
Yep.
And so when you reach and feel for the ground, you're constantly reaching and feeling like this. So then it creates.
And your big toe has the most amount of sensory.
And it's the most length.
And it's the most length.
Right? Most length.
It's all coming together.
Right?
Right now.
So you put your kid in one of those things, and it's if for long enough, eventually they're going to start to be here, and then they're going to be here, and then they're going to be here. So, and we know that this is a destructive behavior. So how can we get the kid to be here more often? Well, let them crawl, let them stand up on their own, let them be outside barefoot.
Yeah, not
Let
the
them-
bouncy house.
Not the bouncy house. Let them play outside. And I think that that's something that we're starting to lose as a society, especially as video games are more and more complex
Yep.
and getting our attention more and more. We're sitting down more. I fell victim to it 8 years ago, right? Yeah, well, I fell victim to it when I was in 5th grade. But anyways, the big thing is just learning how we can help our kids develop so that they have a little bit more of an awareness than what we had, giving them a better chance than what we had. And that's what I'm really excited for, is to eventually become a dad and be like, hey, I've got these guidelines that I can follow. I don't want to like grasp on and like be like helicopter dad and be like, oh, you got to be outside playing, and I'm going to go do it.
Yep.
And if they want to come with, they're going to come with. And more times than not, if you as a father are going to go outside, your kid's going to come with. And you teach them things. Maybe eventually they get older, teach them how to build a tree house, something like that. Just natural stuff instead of being inside all day, instead of being in the bouncy house. What's your thoughts? That was a lot.
Yeah, that was a lot. But really, you turned on a light bulb for me with the entire process of using the big toe to feel and the inside edge to feel and reach, and the backdrop, because I do think that they're one and the same. So I had this this situation. I was deep in the jungle, the Yucatan jungle of Mexico. It was 2 or 3 in the morning, and I woke up and I had to go to the bathroom. You know what I'm talking about. And there was no lights in the jungle, and I had to make this, maybe it was like a 30 or 40-yard trek to the
I know where
house.
you're going with this.
And it was in pitch black, and I only had, maybe they were like 2.5 foot long wooden planks that were like strewn as like and these planks were maybe 2 to 3 or 4 feet above. They were this platform walkway. And so I had to walk this platform walkway for like about 30 yards. It felt like eternity, in pitch black darkness, basically. And because I couldn't see, the way that I walked was I relied completely on my backdrop and my big toe feel to make sure that when I was going to take a step, I wasn't just going to go,
There.
oh, and just fall
Right.
off. I had to backdrop, put all my pressure in the backside, and go, oh, okay, there is wood right there. And I would go left, right to make sure that I wasn't on the edge. I go left, right, step. Left, right, step. And I was doing this, and I was doing it so meticulously and as fast as possible because I had to go to the bathroom really bad. And I was like, I was like laughing as I'm like observing myself having this experience of I have to go to the bathroom. I have to move so fast. But if I just walk like I'm walking on pure cement sidewalks that are completely with shoes on, if I just walk like that, I might walk off. And I'm in bare
Be
feet
hurt
too.
or die.
Yeah, there's twigs, there's rocks, there's like not good stuff on the jungle floor. So I realized like that was like a big, like the backdrop is essential,
Mm-hmm.
and this ability to feel. And then, okay, when I'm putting pressure on my foot, boom, I'm going to create this torquing action, because also if I don't create that torque action, if I go into a knee drive, a straight linear knee drive, I don't really have a good ability to reach and feel. If I just take a step and go just straight knee drive, it's like it's hard. It's like watch people do a pistol squat. It's super uncontrolled. But you see us do a backdrop, and you're like, yo, I can put this foot wherever I want. I can feel and I can reach for a bunch of things, find it, load it.
Load it.
So that was just really cool. It's cool to hear you talk about that in the open chain during the gait cycle. There is probably some version of this pronation, which is the same as when you're swimming, or this throw action that you go like, whoa, you go like this. You straight up go like this when you're swimming. When I'm paddling and surfing, I'm like, wow, this final.
Even like the art aspect of feel with the hand,
right,
is not like this. The art aspect is like out here, inside wrist bone low. If we're speaking relatable between the foot and the hand, the inside wrist bone will go low. Like you'll be here. A lot of times there is a lot of art that happens inside wrist bone high, but sometimes there's a lot of painting that goes on inside wrist bone low. But like the feel of it. It's undeniable that is a function of the inside wrist bone going low or the inside ankle bone going low, is the feel aspect of life. And it's interesting to hear your perspective, because I live in a big city. You've been living in jungles, and that's different how we apply what we have learned, because you're applying it directly to nature. I'm applying it to hundreds of thousands of people that I'm watching in the concrete jungle and seeing what they do. Like I use the pool analogy, I use the baby analogy, you use the jungle analogy, right? So it's undeniable that this stuff happens everywhere, and it's just a matter of learning how to apply it to our own lives to help us become better for ourselves and the people that come after us.
100%. And it also makes a lot of sense that if you grew up not only wearing shoes that had beautiful cushions underneath that were protected for your feet, those J's on, and then you also walked mostly on concrete that was completely graded, completely flat, sidewalks that didn't have little hills, ups and downs, that didn't have unexpected drop-offs. Like everything was like pretty safe and pretty straight. So you can almost take that like I need to make sure my next step is strong and stable and is going to support me. That just kind of goes out the window. You don't really need to worry about that anymore. You can just put a podcast in, look up at the sky, and just walk straight. And as long as you walk straight, you're gonna be okay.
And then the wear and tear sets in, and I'm just getting old. You know.
So there's a certain, we know this, that comfort kills, but when we do take away natural surfaces, natural experiences for the human body, which is uneven terrain with sharp objects, with dull objects, and trees and different things you have to navigate around. You have to make sure that your steps, like if you ever trail run, you're very aware of where you're stepping, because that trail is constantly changing. It's going left, right, it's going up and down. There's rocks, there's all types of different things.
You know, what's crazy is the ocean, besides what happened the other day, has been challenging me, like the sharp objects, because again, I live in Dallas. I'm not exposed to beaches, sharp objects under my feet. So like I'm watching you and Ewar walk out on into the water, even Carly walking into the water, and I walk out there and I'm like, dude, this sucks. Like I don't want to do this, but like at the same time, it's about being there and learning from that. And the same thing that you're talking about in the jungle, like I'm touching the surface under the ocean, under the waves, to feel if there's something dangerous for me to step on there, because you can't see.
Yeah.
But for those of you that want to know, this is what happened the other day. At the beach. But we got
wasn't a shark attack.
Wasn't a shark attack.
It would have been a cool story, but wasn't a shark attack.
It was ignorance of ocean tendencies. That's what we'll call it.
Yeah. And no matter how much you know about movement, or how good of a quote-unquote mover you are, or how strong you are in the fitness world or strength and conditioning room, when you get out into the real world, when you go out onto the field, when you go into the ocean, If you do not have that experience, you are a beginner. You
Yeah.
are a complete newbie.
Yeah, that's
You're
right.
starting out level 0. No
Even-
matter how strong you are underneath the bar, if you go out into the world and start doing some manual labor, you're at level 0.
Absolutely, and that's. I remember the video that I sent you, and I was like, should I post this? And it was like, true strength is being able to be resilient to nature and move forward for a really long time. And like that, I mean, that's one thing that hit me the other day, right? When I got hit by that wave and hit the ocean floor, you got to be resilient to nature. Like that takes strength. I didn't get back out there and go surf again. I went home and showered.
Take a warm shower.
You know? That's right. But it's like under all these conditions, how can you be strong when it comes to nature? Because it's unpredictable and stronger than any amount of weight that you can put on a bar. Like there's no going back when that wave hits me.
Yeah, and there's no amount of lat pull downs and dumbbell rows that will make you good at paddling a surfboard.
But you know what can set you up for success?
Tell me.
Getting that back chain strong.
That's 100% true.
It can set you up. It's
And-
not going to make you perfect, but it can help you in those positions.
Yes, it can empower you. So, and this is something that I've been thinking about too. Is like, I think that what you and I have done for ourselves, first and foremost, with all of this awareness, with all of this deep recode work, with understanding how the foot and the hip, all this works, is we have made ourselves into that kinesthetic intelligence. We've raised that our proprioception of our movement of our body, so that when we do go out into the world, into the ocean, onto a sports field, we can learn extremely, extremely, extremely rapidly. And that learning process is also is not going to be hindered by our inability to move our body. Like, we know how many times have athletes or people in a fitness gym been cued to do something, and then they go, like, what?
Huh?
Like what?
Yeah. You ever seen that meme of the cat? And he's like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, what do you mean? Like, I asking people, like, hey, do you feel your right hip? And they're like, what? No one's ever asking me if I feel my hip. Do you feel your hip? And they're like, I don't know. Like, so there's that's happened that restricts learning. And then the other thing that really restricts learning is you get hurt.
Yeah.
Like, you're sitting in a chair all day, and then a nice swell comes in the ocean, you want to go surfing, and then your low back hurts.
Yeah.
That surfing experience either is not going to happen, it's not going to be fun, you're just not going to be really present for it if you're hurting. And so there's like really like the most amount of awareness that you can have of your movement of your body, you're going to be able to learn really good. And then you're able to learn a lot, you got to stay in the field. You got to stay in the element, and you got to be able to like be resilient to whatever obstacles come in that scenario, whether it's the ocean, the jungle, a sports field. Like, you just got to stay in the game.
Yeah. And another, like I remember having the conversation earlier about our job is to empower others. And I think what comes with that is we're giving ourselves such high awareness that we're able to extend that to the people in our near circle, right? So now I'm becoming aware, and the person next to me, Sally per se, right? Sally's there, and she has no clue what her right foot even feels like. And I'm sitting over here on the ground kind of just messing, and she's like, well, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just doing this. Try this out, just try it out. And she starts doing something, extends her awareness, right? It's just, I like to put it like this. I want relationships with people that are either holding, we're on a ladder per se. Imagine this. Got somebody on a ladder above me, I'm in the middle, got somebody on the ladder below me. I want relationships with people that are either reaching their hand down to help me up the ladder, or with somebody that's going to take my hand when I reach down, and I grab their hand and I say, come on, let's go. Like, I'm going to help you up. And somebody above me, whoever it is, you and I do that for each other all the time. And it's the person that's above you may change all the time. Having a mentor is so crucial for development in any field. Like I said before, the barista that's a world class at making coffee, that ladder per se, that hypothetical ladder can switch from subject to subject. It's like I've got somebody that's helping me here. And I'm going to help somebody else in that category as well. I'm going to give back to somebody else. And in movement, somebody's going to help me, and then I'm going to help somebody else. And I'm going to continue helping people in as many areas as possible. So extending my awareness in all of these categorical ladders is so crucial for all relationships that I choose to be in. Because if a relationship is you trying to grab my ankle instead of my hand, now we have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, is that relationship worth having when they want to pull you down rather than grab your hand and come up with you?
Yeah.
And that's where I think collaboration comes into play. I kind of went off on a tangent there, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. The saying is crabs in a bucket.
Oh, yeah.
And you start climbing out of the bucket, and then the other crabs want to pull you down, because not only do they want to pull you down, hey, don't think you're better than us, but then also it's like, I'm going to use you to elevate myself type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
There was something that you said that was, I think, extremely profound and very important for a lot of people. And it also encapsulates the difference of priority that you and I have when it comes to the physical body versus a majority of the people today. Majority of people today are concerned with, how can I get faster right now? I want to build more muscle right now. I want to lose weight right now. I want to get faster, stronger, better, more good looking right now. And there are many ways to do and accomplish those goals that you have. Like, for instance, if you want to gain a bunch of muscle, hey, you can go down to Mexico and you can get on some steroids, and you can do that really, really rapidly fast, change your physiology. You want to look a certain way, you can go see a plastic surgeon. You can take some medicine to help you lose weight type of thing.
Right.
So a lot of people, when they're talking about the movement, training of the body, strength of the body, conditioning, sports, performance, all that stuff is like right now, better, faster, stronger, bigger muscles, leaner, all these types of things. Our perspective and our priority is longevity of movement. Like you said, I want to be 90 years old and running up the stairs and on the ground playing with my grandkids. Longevity of practice, longevity of movement. We're not concerned with what can I do right now to give me what I think I want. It's how can I support my body so that my body can be with me through an entire lifetime. And what you said was, and I think, and please correct me, I want to get, because I kind of forget, it was like, it was immediate efficiency versus longevity. There was like two words that you use as, hey, if you want to get strong, yes, there are some very rapid and efficient ways that we can do that in a very short time span. But when you go the short route, when you go the acute route, like right now, you are going to be, there's going to be a higher cost to your body.
I got you. And I look at this as a gradient between efficiency and effectiveness.
Efficiency and effectiveness.
Right. And that gradient, everything has a cost. Like, to put it in perspective, let's say you have a killer company and you're making millions and millions and millions, and you have a family and you're not there for your kids. What's the cost, right? You can have these great things. This comes from Simon Sinek, by the way, because the idea of opportunity cost does not come from him, but the perspective I'm putting it in does. And so, like, he asks the question of, oh, you're doing great here? Well, what did it cost you? And then it's, oh, like, that really sucked. That happened to you, but what did you learn? And I love his mindset and a lot of things, like Start With a Why, great book, Leaders Eat Last. He's got such great stuff. But to come back on to topic here, the idea of efficiency versus effectiveness comes down to, we can build power very quickly And we know we can. There's a lot of evidence that shows that deadlifts, power cleans, back squats develop power very quickly. You start to see this spike in the graph. But at what cost? Because you're getting something that's great, and there's no denying that. You're getting the power from the deadlift. You're getting the power from the power cleans. You're producing more force. It's just the way it is. But you may only be able to play for the next 3 years, right? It's almost like that, the common question. If I offered you $15 million, would you take it right now? Of course. The only catch is you can't wake up tomorrow, right? No, I would never take that, right? Because time is more valuable. And it's the most valuable thing that we have on this planet. Time in itself, but more importantly, time spent doing what you love with who you love whenever you want. And if you can do that, you have fulfillment. Now, to bring it back and hone it in on to more efficiency versus effectiveness in the movement side, you can have an athlete that's highly efficient that can play for a long period of time that may not, let's just say, take pitchers for example, that may not throw 95 miles an hour, but he can throw for the rest of his life and he's not going to get hurt. Or you can kind of find somebody that maybe throws 88 to 90, pretty efficient, looks nice, good spin on the ball. Somebody like Greinke, right? If you don't know who that is, go look him up. By the way, he sits on the ground all the time in between innings. He's viewed as like the weird guy in baseball, but he has really good methods that work for him. And even more into like the middle range, somebody like Greg Maddux. You have somebody that's throwing low 90s, dots the corners, plays for a long period of time, isn't throwing 100, but then you have guys, a lot of guys in today's era that are throwing really hard and getting hurt quicker. And that's just the common thing amongst all sports is these guys are like reaching numbers that we never thought possible. But now in basketball, we have a time limit for how long you have to play, right? Now we see in women's soccer that post that we saw the other day, like what's happening in women's soccer that we can change, instead of looking at how these individuals move on a basic level. They're looking at what can we do within the sport to stop them from maybe playing more often or putting the pitch count on the pitchers. I mean, Nolan Ryan threw 256 pitches in a 13-inning game. We don't see that today. Why is that? And that's
in one baseball game, 256.
Not including his bullpen pitches. So he probably threw over 300 throws that day.
If I try and throw 5 baseballs as fast as I could, I'm gonna throw on my shoulder.
Yeah, right. And one thing is, it's definitely developed from like I like to look at childhood experiences from these athletes too. Like Nolan Ryan had a very farm boy lifestyle outside, good forearms, like just worked, right? But he loved baseball, and that's what he did. So it helped him develop. And I think you look at that efficiency versus effectiveness scale, and you kind of find, like, where on that scale do I want to be? And you can, like I just talked about with other subjects, you can look at that for any subject in your life. It doesn't just have to be your sports performance. It can even be, I don't know, a stupid example, but how effective do I want to be in doing laundry, right? If I throw all of my clothes in at the same time, the effectiveness is high because you're doing all your laundry at once, but the efficiency, you're sacrificing, maybe some of your clothes don't get clean. But then if you go on the other spectrum,
or you break the washer.
Yeah, or you break the washer.
Maybe
right?
you do it good for like 6 months, but then all of a sudden
you break the washer.
Yeah, you break the washer.
But then on the other side of it, you throw in maybe 5 pieces of clothing every day, and your efficiency is super high, and maybe your washer lasts longer, but you're not able to. You're losing some of your time because you're having to do it more often.
Yeah.
Right. So like you're kind of getting these opportunity costs, and once you start to understand that, you can kind of get a perspective of where you want to be in your life. Most people, when it comes to laundry, is like procrastination, but like,
Yeah.
I mean,
with
that's where I'm
with
at.
a lot of things. So to reiterate, we have effectiveness and then efficiency. And what you're highlighting is that we have some really powerful methods that are extremely effective at creating change within the body, increasing speed, performance, strength, muscle mass, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
However, those might be really acutely effective, but there is a cost to them.
Yep.
Meaning that down the line, there might be some problems.
Yes.
You might get injured. You might have chronic stiffness, immobility. There is something that's going to happen that's not going to be ideal.
Yeah, and it's not if, it's when.
If it's
when you're training that hard with tons of weight and throwing it around, you're compromising a lot of things. Because if I'm on one end of it, the effectiveness scale, if I'm back squatting 315 3 times a week, I'm compromising some things. And if you don't think that you will compromise something by putting 315 on your back, no matter how strong you are, that's ignorant to say. Because if you can't do a perfect squat, whatever perfect is in your eyes, with just your body weight, when you look at the evidence like we talked about with all the college athletes, how they're all different, and then you look at the indigenous cultures and how they're all the same, if you can't do something similar to them with just your body weight, you're definitely going to compromise something. So when you're on that side of the effectiveness of, I'm squatting 315, I'm producing a lot of power, something's being compromised and something is going to give in the future. But then on the other side, if you only do body weight and you're really, really good at only doing body weight squats, that's all you're ever going to get. So that's when you kind of find, where is that middle area where I can start holding a plate, I can start putting a weighted vest on, I can start, doing something to add some resistance to help me gain some power quicker without compromising too much. And
Right.
It's that constant give and take game of understanding what's your opportunity cost and what's your return on investment with each exercise that you're doing.
Yep. This is such a high-level conversation, and it's so important for athletes because ultimately the end goal, the end dream of the individual athlete is how you will determine on what part of the gradient I'm going to be on.
Yeah.
You have somebody who is, in the high, they're a high elite athlete, collegiate, maybe professional, and they're like, look, I have to gain size and I have to gain this power. I move pretty well. I'm not in pain. I'm going to do this program to gain that size and to gain that power because my livelihood, my finances, my entire dream life is on performing. And I'm not performing at the highest level. So then you have that person do the deadlifts, the cleans.
In baseball, it's often the reverse lunge. A lot of people do like heavyweight reverse lunges. And that's where I kind of I'm finding ways to be like, okay, let's do that heavyweight reverse lunge. Let's couple it with something that's going to kind of protect you and kind of help you with that efficiency side.
Yep.
And that's where performance training gets tricky, because you don't want to put your athlete in a bad situation. But sometimes some guys are like, yeah, I only want to play for a year or two. I want to make $2 million. Okay.
Yeah, do what it takes.
That's okay. Do what it takes.
Yeah.
Do what it takes.
It's really the race car analogy, whereas I want to race this car, this engine. I want to put it all out on the track. I want to race as fast as I can. When you do that, there's going to be some things that are going to bad things are going to happen when you push to the highest level. And then you have somebody else who's, let's say, like a mid-grade athlete, they're a high school athlete, or they know they're just going to play in college. They don't have a future. They're already studying something else. They're already planning a different profession outside of sports. That person is in the longevity game. They want to play their sports, but they want that car to be able to drive, the car meaning their body, to be able to drive for an entire lifetime. But what's the problem that I see is that the way that we train our most elite athletes and become extremely effective at getting them to be more powerful and stronger, we take that same mentality and we apply that to our youth, high school and even our collegiate athletes, when there's only a tiny fraction of them that are going to be playing at the highest level, but we treat them as if they were an elite athlete. And an elite athlete has a lot on the line in terms of money, in terms of the profession, in terms of the performance. But a high school athlete, their athletic career may or may not be the thing that is the most important to their actual entire life. Like, they might perform well in their sport, which is good for their confidence, good for their ego, good for their social status. But if they fail all their grades and they flunk out of school, that's not the most important thing. Someone that's a professional fighter, professional anyone, like, their sport and their physicality requires that level of, like, let's be extremely effective at times. If we apply that to everyone across the board, somebody who is just going through a normal high school collegiate program, we're making them be as effective as possible, and we're not asking the question that you're proposing to us is, what is going to be the cost to this athlete?
Yes.
I can look at this third string athlete. I know that he's not going to go play at a high level thing. Do I need to make him perform better and be way more powerful? Or is it more important for this individual's life to make them a really good mover, to make them not have pain, to not get injured so that they can have a normal life, go out on the weekends with their friends and not be hobbling around?
Right. And let's even clear that up further. The younger the athlete is, the more efficient we want them to be and get really good at that efficiency, and then slowly bring it to more of like the middle of that gradient of effectiveness and efficiency. So if I train a 13-year-old kid and I throw 150 pounds on the bar and tell him to squat every other day, that's not productive for the next 10 years of his life.
Right.
He needs to get really, really good.
But even a strength conditioning coach, I would never program that every other day, a back squat.
Okay, yeah, and that's just an exaggeration. But even if you're doing it once a week, I mean, you do that 52 times a year times the next 10 years, you're doing that 520 times, and you're adding weight every month, right? Even if it's just 2.5 pounds.
Yeah,
right? You just do the math, right? Yeah. And you're doing that until failure most of the time.
That's a huge input into that individual's movement and their physiology.
Absolutely.
And what we're not asking is, does this specific individual, is that cost of this input, is that worth to them? Is that the decision that they would like to make? And that's
where I'm saying that the max effectiveness, that side, is like, okay, we've got 1 to 2 years to make it to the pro level, and you're throwing 86, and that's not going to play. Mm-hmm. We need to throw 95. We need to get you there.
Yep.
And you need to build the strength, and you have to ask these moral questions to the person. It's not a, I'm going to tell you to do this. It's a, let's build a relationship. Let's have a conversation on who you see yourself being, and is this okay with you? Are you okay with the cost that comes with this? Mm-hmm. Because this may happen in the future if you continue down this road. Or would you rather take the longer route, build it very foundationally, and take the chance that you're now 26 years old trying to play in the MLB? And that's tough because there's 18-year-olds that are throwing 100 miles an hour. And that's hard to compete with.
Yep.
Because they don't want somebody that's 26 when they can get an 18-year-old that throws 100.
Right.
And that's just something that you have to ask yourself as an athlete, and something as a coach you have to raise their awareness of what's going on. So just, again, taking the awareness that we have and extending it to the people around us and being like, hey, this is the situation. These are our options. What do you want to do? Because it's your life. It's not me creating a program that says you have to do this because I said. It's a conversation like that. It should be a conversation every time.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of work to have a high level conversation. But I do hope that the conversation continues to happen between coaches and athletes, as well as people within the strength conditioning and fitness community. You know, what is, just because something makes you faster doesn't mean that it's completely going to be the best option for you. Like you
Is there a
said,
better way?
if you can be faster, that's great. But if you're going to be faster and then you're also going to, you know, pull a hamstring,
Right.
is that worth it?
Right.
You know, type of thing. And so
And
we have to have these conversations, because a very sad thing is when an athlete at the high school and college level especially is playing their sport and then has an injury that could have been prevented, and then they're out for the season.
right.
And then maybe they come back and then they hurt something else, or they never return to that same level of play. Like, that to me is extremely, extremely depressing.
Yeah.
And we're not really having the conversation that in depth to really ask the individual at what level, like the conversation I had to have with myself with mixed martial arts and fighting, at what level am I willing to sacrifice and pay the cost to go in and fight somebody? Does it really mean that
Yeah.
much to me to continue competing, to potentially have my arm broken, potentially have a bunch of concussions, to get my nose broken and have a smushed face for
Yeah.
the rest of my life? Is that cost like good enough for me to continue doing this thing? I didn't really have anyone that was asking me these questions.
Yeah.
I had to like look at it and be like, what, do I really want to keep doing this?
Right.
Yeah. So I hope these conversations keep happening, because they're extremely important.
Yeah, I think that an athlete has the ability to make a decision for themselves, and we need to respect that as coaches and be able to give them that, give them or help them understand what's going to happen in the future. And again, I think this is so important to understand for all coaches, is when you look at an exercise, what's the opportunity cost and what's the return on your time that you're spending doing it? Because even crawling has an opportunity cost. Crawling's return on time is you're going to feel great. Your hips are going to feel great. Like baby crawling, for those of you that aren't picking up what I'm putting down, but baby crawling until failure has a really high return on feel and movement, but it has a very low, the opportunity cost is you're not developing power.
No.
That's just it. I mean, that's just it. You may develop some feel that might help you get into better positions to throw the ball better with what you already have, but you're not developing power. It's just plain and simple. If you want to develop power, get on the Z-tread, take it to a 15, take it to a 25 incline, and start doing those floats.
What I will say, though, is, and this is kind of implied in how you said it, but I want to say it so that people understand.
Sure.
Let's say you do start doing something like baby crawling or some of these different body weight exercises that Colin and I promote. You might have immobility or some general unawareness on how to move your body in the best way possible, that is making it so that you're not able to tap into your power potential.
Exactly.
So what you're saying is, what you have right now, tap into everything that you have right now. Don't leave anything on the table. Because if you leave anything on the table in terms of movement efficiency, like, you actually don't know what you have. Why develop or put a bigger engine into a car when you're not even using the whole engine? Do you really need a whole engine in the car if you're not even using it to its full capacity? So movement training can allow you to express your full power, your full strength, your full speed, and then there's a limit. And then if you want to go higher, then there's a way to train that.
Yeah, find a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Find a good way to do it over small incremental periods, not something that's going to get you strong within the next 3 months. Find something that's going to get you stronger over the next year or two, and you're going to start to see little tiny increments of gain. And this even goes back to a concept that I like to use with all my athletes, especially the ones that deal with failure often, which pitchers, hitters deal with failure often. So if you're not familiar with like velocity training for pitchers and just throwers in general, a lot of times you have more bad days than good days. And what I like to, and I apply this to everything in life, I think it's an awesome concept, but I call it the progression rings. And if I was able to draw it, it would kind of look like just like circles, but just trending upwards, right? And that's your progress, because and they go this way actually. So it creates this like little loop, right? And it goes upwards. So for example, let's say today I'm throwing 70 miles per hour, and that's my top. And then I'm training, and next week I throw 72, right? So I went up a little bit. And then next week I come back and I throw 71. But now that's viewed as a failure because my top is 72, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I just failed at a higher level. You see what I'm saying? And when you continue to fail at a higher and higher level in everything that you do, it's progress. And so it's not always about reaching your peak. And this is something that I learned at the baseball ranch, but like recently within the past 3 or 4 years kind of put a term on it for myself, because I drew it out for somebody because I was like really like digging into the concept, and I was like, it looks like this. And I was like, that makes sense. And but like failing at a higher level than you did last month, or failing at a higher level than you did last year, is such a beautiful process that we take for granted, and we get so frustrated with ourselves. But if you can just get a little bit better than you were last week or last month or last year, whatever the time frame is that you're measuring, if you can get that little bit and fail at a higher level every single time, doesn't matter. I mean, it matters what your peak is, for sure. Matters what you do at your best. But if you're failing now 6 months down the road, you're failing and you're throwing 80 miles an hour and your top is 86, and you're looking at yourself like, damn, this sucks. But then you really look at it and you're like, 6 months ago I was throwing 70, that was my top, right? So like that's such a cool concept that I think baseball brings that a lot, because it's such a big sport around failure. It helps us deal with it. But just life in general, like, you know, maybe for somebody that's in corporate America, they're making 20,000 and they're like on top of the world, and then next year they make 30,000, and then the year after that they go back down and it's 25,000. You know, like money can be an interesting thing, but if you, as long as you're like keep trending upwards over a long time, it is what it is.
It's been really cool to watch you trend upwards in your movement capacities and unlocking your body and your coaching abilities and your business, gateway, max, etc. So
Yes, sir.
Closing out, I know you wanted to talk about slant boards, and you got some over there.
Yeah.
And if somebody isn't aware of slant boards or what they can be used for, let's have a conversation about that.
Yeah. So the slants are obviously a important product or tool for developing that torque in the outside of the foot. And like we talked about earlier, and like we've talked about this week, is that anticipation. So kind of like leaning away from the board instead of kind of like feeding the angle. We don't want to like come over here, because now I'm creating what we would call a false bow, right? I'm just kind of dumping that knee out. But when we use the boards at a higher level of awareness, we kind of resist the angle and start to get that burn going in the outside of the foot, outside of the ankle. So the product in itself, you can find so many different variations of boards, but we took it upon ourselves to start manufacturing our own.
Yeah, let me see.
Because my goal was to be able to fit it in a backpack, because there's a lot of middle school athletes that will be training in the future, high school athletes, and we want them to be able to take it to the park, take it to the field with them. And it's a simple design. It's not crazy, but it's still sturdy, and it helps, even if you have weight on it. So it's not going to break, and, well, unless you intentionally break it. But it's just a quality, simple product that we decided these dimensions help with portability, but also the angle, which I put it at 16 degrees. So in between, maybe somewhere between like 11, I felt like 22 got really steep. But if you do some quality work on these, you can find the feels that you're looking for. And I demonstrated that earlier. But
You and I both used slant boards for like 2 to 3 years, or maybe for me it was like a couple years that I was religiously
Right.
squatting, doing single leg
Religiously.
squats, doing hinges, like always on the slant boards.
Well, let me tell you a story. Because I used to take these things. I used to have 4 or 5 pairs around the house. Like I
Yeah,
would
I
put.
remember there was just everywhere.
Yeah, I would put them even when I was in college. I'd put a pair next to the sink.
Yep.
I'd put a pair next to the stove. I'd put a pair in the living room. I put a pair in my room. And shout out Cody Woods. The big quote he helped me with was, "Time spent on the boards is valuable." And that just stuck with me. I'm like, okay, if I spend more time on these boards, I'm going to get a little bit more burn in the ankles. I'll be a little bit more intentional with how I'm standing.
They are stations of awareness.
Yeah,
little awareness
stations.
station.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're standing on them, you have a little bit more of that awareness of how am I actually doing the activity that I'm doing? How am I washing my dishes? How am I cooking my meals? How am I watching TV? Like all of the activities that you do throughout the house, you can just utilize the pairs of, if you have multiple pairs of boards, or you can just lug the one pair that you have around and stand on them more often. But I think for the first few years of training, it was just religious, just on the boards as much as possible. But we were also obsessed.
Yeah. David Weck said something cool that I liked. He said, we have the problem as humans that we have a 3-dimensional foot interacting with a 2-dimensional surface of the ground, which is a problem. How do you have a
That's
3-dimensional
interesting.
working thing that has to interact only with a 2-dimensional, like flat surface, like the ground?
Right.
And so that's why when you stand on sand, soft dirt, just the foot is able to actually mold more of a 3-dimensional type of grabbing action, which is what it likes.
Yeah.
Spherical surfaces, and then you have a slant board, which allows the foot to act
Helps
more.
it a little more.
It just helps it a little bit more be a 3-dimensional acting thing on a 2-dimensional surface, it creates so much proprioception for the entire body, but especially the feet.
Not to mention like balance aspect too.
Oh my goodness.
It helps with balance for sure.
What I tell people a lot is like there's a massive IT band on the outside of our leg and not really on the inside of our leg, like for a reason. Even the adductor is still a muscle. The IT band is a band of fascia that we talk about as if it was muscle. It's just this massive, like
basically unterrible.
unterrible.
I mean, I think the true stats behind it is like per square inch, it takes 2,000 pounds of pressure to stretch it 1%.
Yeah. So it's almost like if you look at the design of that, like, there's supposed to be so much force to that lateral part of the leg.
Why wouldn't it be designed that way?
I mean, I see it when there's movement happening, but when people are just doing straight up and down or just straight knees over toes type of stuff, it's like you're not utilizing this incredible physiological feature that is in the body.
It's a safety net. It just catches you.
It's a safety net. It's also kind of a trampoline.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a lateral trampoline. You put all this pressure into there. The IT band connects into the glute, the lat complex, everything. And just
you want to know how to get bouncy? Start getting
Use your bands.
Use your bands.
Use your bands. So where can people get some of these cool slant boards?
So just off of our website, gatewaymax.com, and it's G8waymax.com. So the 8 is like an infinity sign, just like a much of what we've been talking about.
Oh, right? That makes sense.
Yeah. And I like to use it as a like gateway is a play on words for me, like GAIT as well, where it's the gateway, right? So just kind of like I've got like these little meanings behind it, and there's other things in there.
Way.
We've got a few other meanings behind it, but mainly like even like the gateway to your potential, like there's so many different aspects in which we take the name and just look at it from different angles. Much like myself, I like to look at things from a bunch of different perspectives and open people's eyes.
Yeah, you definitely do. And you've helped open my eyes, so thank you so much for your friendship, for your coaching, and for being on the podcast, my brother.
Love you, bro.
Thank you again. This is the Primal Movement Podcast with Bam and Coach Colin. We'll see you next time.